Hey everyone, Andrew, Day 2 Dryden here on a special recording for Day 2 MTG because there's been a big splash in the Magic community, whatever you want to call it. We have a new format coming to Magic. Not only that, but it is a Wizards supported format. So the new format is called Pioneer. I'm gonna talk a little bit about some things I like and don't like about the format, as well as how I think burn and maybe red aggressive decks fit into this going forward. Not everything I say is going to be positive. I do like the idea of the format. I'll say that right off the top, but got some serious reservations. Got some serious reservations about a lot of it. Well, whatever. We'll get into it. First things first. What is Pioneer? Maybe you don't know. I only found out about it yesterday, and it was after people were sending messages on Twitter like, what do you think? What do you think? I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about. What are you talking about? So what Pioneer is it is a new Eternal format that kind of like so when I say that, I mean it's not rotating. The cards won't become obsolete in the format simply based on how old they are, assuming they don't go too far back. So what it is Return to Ravnica block. So that's around, I think it's around like 2013 or so, until until Wizard says otherwise, the current standard sets that have come out. So no Modern Masters, no Eternal Masters, no things like that. Standard sets, core sets, those blocks from Return to Ravnica moving forward. There's a lot of cards in there. Sometimes I forget how long I've been back in Magic and how many sets they've actually released. So yeah, pretty sizable card pool with some notable exceptions though. Right off the bat, no fetch lands. That's a big part of this format. And one of the things about that springs to my mind is that I'd have to look at all the cards to double check, or I guess triple check because I did look at them today. I think enemy colored mana bases are actually way better than the allied colors based on what we've got because of the fast lands and because of shock lands. So allied colors have shock lands, but there's no fast land mana bases for the allied color pairs, right? So there's, Spire Bluff Canal for, red blue, but there's no what would be an example? There's no Blackleaf Cliffs substitution in something like Red Black, which is traditionally a allied color pair. So that's an interesting thing right off the bat. With that, I'll try to alternate a little bit good and bad stuff, just so it's not like all gloom and doom and whatever. So again, like I said, I really love this idea. I really love the idea of a new format. If you've seen Nikachu's video that he put out yesterday on it, I agree with pretty much everything he said. We have conversations about this regularly, and we have over the years, about how, Legacy is basically becoming what Vintage has been, right? Vintage has been unaffordable for a very long time, without, 10 proxies or something like that being allowed in tournaments. And so Legacy is not far behind it with the dual lands and things like that. You don't even need Power 9. Now there's just been cost prohibitive changes in Legacy for a very long time, which is now why it's sort of going the same way. And it's just not feasible. So what I think Nikachu and I have sort of seen was probably the likely alternative is now Modern is going to be what Legacy has been for a long time, but without the problems of the reserve list being able to keep Wizards from having a course correction. And now this new format, Pioneer, was going to sort of slot into where Modern used to be and has been for the last, 10 years or so. Maybe not quite 10 years. Someone correct me on that if you want. But that kind of idea, right? However, again, without the reserve list, there's a lot of things Wizards can do to play around with those numbers, make the format as accessible as they want. Keep in mind, they don't necessarily want the format to be 100% accessible. Wizards won't be happy if you can just buy into a Modern deck or buy into a Pioneer deck for $5. That doesn't sell packs or make them money, and that also doesn't really help the local game stores. No one who's counting dollars in that situation outside of the player base would be happy with that. So yes, it'll be more affordable than previous options, right? Modern will still almost always, I mean, outside of some crazy events, be more affordable than Legacy is now, but only to a certain degree, right? It's going to be measured, but there will still be controls in place. That being said, the name sucks. Pioneer? What, are you kidding me? It's horrible. First off, Pioneer makes it sound older than Modern. Pioneers are like a 150, 200-year-old thing. That's what I think of when I think Pioneers. I guess it's on, I guess it's on brand, considering, Wizards is sort of finding new revenue streams the way Pioneers, I guess we're sort of exploring the new world, air quotations on new world, for profits and, revenue streams of that nature, beaver pelt hats. That's an old school thing. The only difference is it's the player base, not the natural resources of North America that are sort of being mined for dollars, if you know what I mean. And it's got a really sort of Manifest Destiny kind of feel to it, which, I mean, sort of Frontier for that matter. I'm not sure how PC that is in 2019. I'm not really down with the name. I think the name is absolutely garbage. I don't know how they marketed that or figured that out, but like, it doesn't work on a flavor level, doesn't work on any of that. So anyway, before the Marxists and the capitalists or whatever start fighting in the comments section about, so the ideology of that, I'm just going to say I don't think the name fits flavor-wise or, chronologically with sort of what it's supposed to mean. So I'll leave it at that. I hate the name, but I mean, it's Wizard supported, so it's going to stick. Fortunately for the EDH community, something like EDH was around and had enough sort of grassroots movement ahead of time that, Elder Dragon Highlander stuck, or at least as an acronym, and is now sort of synonymous with Commander. This will never have a different name. It didn't have the grassroots support, and now it's got Wizard support. So there's that. But yeah, I think the name sucks. But I mean, hey, whatever, it is what it is. So that being said, let's take a look at Burn specifically, because people are asking me about that, and that's sort of what mostly this video is supposed to be about. So let's see how Burn fits into this new Pioneer format right off the bat. So this is the deck that I played my last league with that I recorded. And the first thing I want to point out about this new format, even though it's an Eternal format, whatever, it's really hard for me to see it as a legitimate format. Not because it's not going to be fun, not because there isn't a big enough card pool, not because it doesn't have Wizard support and it's just sort of this weird thing that people are doing for like casual nights. The big thing for me as a red player, is that Lightning Bolt isn't legal. Are you kidding me? Lightning Bolt isn't legal? There has never been a format that Lightning Bolt hasn't been legal. Ever. Like, well, okay, outside of a standard format. There's never been an Eternal format. Okay? Lightning Bolt is one of the iconic, oldest, reprinted Magic cards. And you don't have it in this new format. If they don't print Lightning Bolt in the next core set, I don't know how I'm going to feel about it. Really not happy about it, for not only my ability to play the cards that I like in what I'm calling in what's being called an Eternal format, but even just what it means for the gameplay, what it means for removal, what it means for aggressive decks. Okay, so let's get that out of the way with right now. There's no Lightning Bolts in the format, and there's nothing like Lava Spike. Now, even without the Lava Spike argument, if you don't have a Lightning Bolt in the deck, I'm not calling it Burn. I'm not calling it Burn. It is not a Burn deck. I don't care what red cards you're playing. I don't care what spells you're playing in this Pioneer format. If you're not playing with Lightning Bolts, you are not playing a Burn deck. Plain and simple. Okay, so let's get that out of the way with right now. I'm not saying there can't be good red strategies, but it's not Burn. Don't tell me it's Burn. I don't understand how you could think it would be Burn. All right, so let's get that over. It's going to be some revisited version of like some standard name like Atarka Red or Hazo Red, or you could call it like Red Deck Wins, something like that. Call it something like Sly, right? If you're a newer Magic player and you haven't been around for like 20 years, Sly is an even older name than Modern, right? It's basically a red deck wins type deck that works on low cost, sort of not necessarily hasty creatures, but fast, low cost creatures that sort of get a red aggressive beatdown plan going on. You're not casting spells, you're attacking with creatures. So again, I feel like that is a much more legitimate name than something like Burn. I'm not calling these new decks Burn until at least a lightning bolt is in the deck. I can't do it. So, with that said, let's take a look at what we've been playing in Modern. At first glance, you're like, okay, we've got a lot of different things, right? We've got Swift Spears, we've got things like that. When you actually look at all the cards in here that you have access to in Pioneer, this is what it looks like. These are all the cards that are available. I've seen people online talking about this is awesome. We've got Atarka's Command, we've got Swift Spear, we've got Skullcrack, we've got Boros Charm. Awesome. Yeah, you know what? Those are all really powerful cards. Here's the problem. We don't have fetch lands, so the mana bases are not going to be as consistent. And on top of that, we don't have a lot of great 1-mana spells. There are good 1-mana spells in red in some of these colors. There absolutely are. You could play something like, I think it's Toolcraft Exemplar. I think it's a 1 white creature from Kaladesh, I think. There are low-costed aggressive creatures. There's Swift Spear. There's Soulscar Mage. There's Get You Lava Runner. A couple others off the top of my head. Anyway, there are low-cost aggressive creatures in these colors, absolutely. But the burn cards, the strong burn cards, are 2 mana. Skullcrack, 2 mana. Eidolon, 2 mana. Boros Charm, Atarka's Command, Searing Blood. Searing Blaze isn't legal. Searing Blood, things like that. They all cost 2 mana. They are slower, they are clunkier, they are arguably more powerful, but they're going to be sort of the icing, not the cake, of what makes these decks function. So that is a problem. Instantaneously, you need to be understanding what you're doing. At first, this morning too, I thought, oh, okay, well, we have Boros Charm, and at least we have like Lightning Helix. No, we don't have Lightning Helix. Lightning Helix hasn't been printed since like Conflux or something. I had to look it up today. I was like, oh, this is great. No. So that's one of the problems with building these new red decks. For that reason, again, without Lava Spikes, there's no Rift Bolts. And even probably one of the best cards that people could think of, something like Skewer the Critics in these lists. Skewer the Critics is not a very good card with Swift Spear, which is arguably the best card out of what's still available here, okay? It's not a very good card with Swift Spear. And it's also not very good without the Lava Spikes or the Rift Bolts to be able to trigger the Spectacle ability in your first main phase. Okay? Without a cheap way to enable Spectacle, you can't do this until your second main phase. You also are not able to now use this card for less than 3 mana to move blockers out of the way if you're going to be having to use creatures. So these are all problems that are going to come up in deck building. I think Skewer the Critics might be fine as an addition to this deck, maybe as like a finisher or some, but it lacks... I think it's going to be playable, but it lacks a lot of synergy with how this deck is constructed. If you think about it in how it worked with the Mono Red Prowess deck, they had things like Lava Dart, I keep wanting to say Frontier, not Pioneer legal. Gut Shot, not Pioneer legal. Things like that. It's very, very awkward and lacks a lot of synergy. So keep that in mind. One thing, however, I will mention though is we have some pretty good graveyard hate in Rest in Peace. At least there's that if you are going to run white. And if you look at the mana base again, we have the Inspiring Vantages and the Sacred Foundries. We have Stomping Grounds, but we don't have Copperline Gorge. We have very limited access to fast green mana. So again, while Atarka's Command and Destructive Revelry are great, it is going to create deck building complications. So these are some of the things I want people to be aware of when like, oh, Burn's going to be great. Like I think it might be a very likely mono red list or very small splashes, depending on what you're able to do with the mana. and it's going to create a lot of. I honestly think blue-red might actually be the way to go early on in the format. Um, there's a few blue-red cards and blue cards that can sort of fill out the early part of the curve, I think. So there's that. Unfortunately, something like Delver of Secrets is not legal. It didn't quite go back far enough for that, so keep that in mind. Outside of that, okay, so one of my big problems with this format too, again with Lightning Bolt not being present, is that I'd have to relook at some of the cards because again I haven't really played Standard, and these cards just simply haven't been better than Lightning Bolt and Path to Exile and things like that. But if you want 1 mana removal, Fatal Push is probably going to be your best bet. Here's the problem with that, if you're running a red deck, is you now need to be using Blood Crypts. And like I said, allied color mana, we don't have things like Blackleaf Cliffs. On top of that, if you're going to be using Fatal Push, you don't have fetch lands to enable Revolt. So that's going to limit how good Fatal Push is going to be. That leaves options like maybe Murder or Hero's Downfall or something like maybe Walk the Plank. Okay? There's no paths, there's no bolts. You're pretty much left with Fatal Push. Here's the problem. Here's one of the problems with that. If you want to go with something like Walk the Plank, it sounds like there's going to be very viable Merfolk decks in this format. They are going to have access to all the Ixalan and the Rivals of Ixalan Merfolk. There's going to be Silvergill Adepts. There's Master of Waves and all those mono blue devotion cards. There's going to be Thassa. Okay? So, right off the top of my head, you need Revolt to do anything to Master of Waves with a Fatal Push. Thassa is indestructible, so even if you were so that dodges both Fatal Push and Walk the Plank, right? It doesn't work that way. And it's and mono and Master Waves is pro red. So now you're slowing down your deck. You're going to be dependent more on the board state, and then this Master Waves might come down and just totally gum up the entire board with protection from red. And you don't have access to Path to Exile to remove it, and so about the only thing I could think of is you'll have access to maybe to devoid spells like Reality Hemorrhage, which, you know what, I'll pull that up right now in case people aren't aware of what that one does. Which is this here. I'll add it to the deck. You probably can't see it very well here. This card right here. So it's 2 mana, 2 damage, instant speed, but it has Devoid, so protection from red doesn't stop it. Great. But again, these are awkward, clunky spells. These are not where you want to be. So yeah, it's gonna be tough for that. The other thing is that probably the most powerful card in this list that we're using is Eidolon. Eidolon is an extremely powerful card. It still is. But when we are not throwing bolts at our opponent, it's much worse. So just a quick math, just a quick look at the math. Let's say I've got an Eidolon on the board in Modern. My opponent is at 9 and I'm at 6. So let's say I have 3 Lava Spikes and I just want to hit my opponent 3 times. I'm going to take lethal damage from the Eidolon triggers before my opponent will take the last 3 damage from the last Lava Spike. Which means I have to be I have to be probably ahead, if not on par with my opponent. So now if we're in a format where the best option we have is like maybe a Shock, which is instant speed, 2 damage for 1 mana, or something like that, well, now that's even worse. Now, if my opponent is even at 6 life and I'm at 6 life, it's hard for me to try to kill them without dying first to my own Eidolon triggers. So having your spells go on average from 2 damage down from 3 damage for each mana you're putting into it, Eidolon's still going to be a great card, I think. It depends on what the metagame looks like. But losing those little edges, right? The same idea with a Boros Charm, right? Getting the 4 damage instead of the 3 damage out of a Boros Charm, per card, it makes a big difference, especially when you're trying to do Eidolon math. So that's also possibly going to cause some big problems. So I don't know how that's going to play out. Yeah, it's so long story short, I don't. Well, I like the new format. I like the idea of the new format. I think it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be good for deck building. I think it's going to be innovative and really really neat. I like that Wizards is doing a new format so we can just get the legacy stuff and get the vintage stuff out of here. We don't have to worry about it anymore. Um, because honestly, outside of online play, it's so cost prohibitive. It's dying, right? So I like that they've sort of done a proactive measure to sort of get around the problems the reserve list comes up with. I don't believe the decks that are going to come out at the very start are going to be burn, just from an ideological perspective that I've made clear. I think they're going to have to be, if there's I think there will be red based aggressive decks. There just will be. There's been a ton in the last years. Like I said, when Atarka was around, when Amonkhet was around, recently with Goblin Chainwhirler and stuff, there's always been, well, not always, there's often been a red aggressive deck that can make something happen. So I think that format, I think the new format will support a red aggressive deck. I just don't know how it's going to look yet, but I am extremely confident it's going to have to be creature based, not spell based, for the reasons I've outlined. And I think some of the cards that people are most excited about have some serious deck building problems, and I don't know if people are as aware of the lack of fetch land mana based problems that are going to arise. So that's my quick take on the new Pioneer format, what I think is going to be really, really neat. I've looked at a few cards. I think I might make another video in the next day or two about cards that I've sort of picked out that I think might make a big splash in a red aggressive deck early on. So stay tuned for that. Outside of that, I also want to quickly say to the viewers of the channel, I've been very, very busy with school lately. I have recorded a league with a special guest, so stay tuned for that for this week, but I haven't been able to get time to edit or post that league yet. I might now at this point, because I'm recording this on a Tuesday. I think I might wait till next week to put it out so I can try to get things back on track. So don't think I've stopped making videos. Please do stay tuned. Please keep subscribing to the channel. Check the Patreon page for free deck list and sideboard guides, all that stuff. But yeah, so anyway, this has been Andrew, Day 2 Dryden, with my take on the Pioneer format as a whole. Some awkward naming from what I see, how Burn or some facsimile thereof fits into the format, and what I think that deck is going to have to look like, at least early on. So hopefully you enjoyed the video. Hopefully subscribe to the channel. Thanks for tuning in. This has been Andrew, Day 2 Dryden, and I will see you next time.